Session of the Doctors of Humanist pilot project. Today we're going to discuss chapter 6 from Adventures in Human Being about the lung, Dr. Gavin Francis. It is a truly wonderful book. Has won many awards and many readers. So it's great pleasure. We are very happy to introduce the author himself, Dr. Gavin Francis, in Edinburgh, a GP working in Edinburgh, and welcome, Gavin. And thank you so much for making the time and taking the time to attend our session.
It's a pleasure.
I just want to begin before the students from Moscow and probably the doctors. We have Dr. Ian Walsh from Belfast attending.
Hi there.
We have Annalisa Manka working as a medical educationalist in Belfast.
Hi, I'm actually a PhD student in Belfast.
Sorry, excuse me. And I think we have connection with Siberia, with Krasnoyarsk, and we have some doctors in Spain listening in. But before the students from Sechenov, Gavin, ask you some questions, I want to highlight something which impacted me or made a big impact from the book. And it's how you dedicate the book to life's enthusiasts and how you round off the book by saying that this is dedicated to your wife, or with the acknowledgements or thanks to your wife, who is truly one of life's enthusiasts. I think this is a beautiful beginning and end. Not really the book, but the frameworking of the book. And I completely agree. And I think in this day and age, we need more enthusiasts. Enthusiasts now are an essential element to 21st century. So I think that's a beautiful dedication. And I will say no more, and I will hand you over to the students in Moscow who have many questions to ask you. Alexander, please.
Hello, Jonathan. Hello, Gavin Francis. I'm happy to participate in today's session, and I'd like to introduce you probably best students in our session of university that are very interested not only in medicine but also in humanistics. And Veronica is the host of chief of our scientific of this society. Not maybe scientific for now, but maybe later, yes, I think. So we have plenty of questions, and I'm democratic, and I think that I can readdress your question to our auditorium to ask some questions.
Of course. Fire away.
Gavin Francis, I'm Veronica, and as Alexander said already. I read some chapters from your book, and I was really inspired. I want to say that I really thank you for this ideas, for this really inspirable ideas and this work. Because Jonathan asked us to analyze one of the chapters of the book. It's lungs.
Yeah.
And I read this chapter, and I decided to write an essay on the theme of what does it mean for us to breathe, and is breathing only the bodily act. And after reading this chapter, I was really inspired, and I felt that all our bodily acts that are made by our organs, they are not just physiologically important for us, but they also play a very important part in our own personality. Because even talking about breathing, I suppose that it's helped us not only to supply our organs and organisms with oxygen. I think that it's also, for example, as I wrote in my essay, it also gives us an opportunity to meditate or to play some musical instruments, for example, saxophone, as I wrote in my essay, because I was really inspired by jazz music, and I really like the idea that you associate the whole human body with some spiritual and things that are very connected, closely connected with our mental capacities inside. Because for me, I'm only a medical student and I'm not a doctor, but I feel myself that I perceive human body not just like a body, but as a place where a real personality, real individual person lives. And
Veronica, can you ask Gavin a question, because that would be nice. Fantastic introduction, but you could ask
I'm
him
enjoying
a
your
question.
enthusiasm.
I agree completely. Veronica's enthusiasm is non-paralleled. She is the most enthusiastic person I have met, I think. But we are quite short, limited for time. Veronica, can you ask Gavin a question or make a comment?
My question is, okay. My question is that I'm very curious to know whether you started to perceive human body like you perceive it now before medical university, or you understood it while you were studying.
Okay, so yeah, the impression which you get from that chapter, particularly on the lung, which tries to think about the body in two ways. It tries to think about the body as something bathed in this spirit that is talked about by the Greeks under one name and the Indians under another name and the Tibetans under another name. So it takes that idea that we're bathed in spirit, and then it also takes the idea that our lungs perform the same function as a tree, but in reverse. You know, we breathe off carbon dioxide and breathe in oxygen, and the tree does the reverse, and the lung looks quite like a tree in reverse, a tree turned inside. And so that kind of perspective, I don't think anybody at medical school ever told me to think like that, but I was very much influenced as a child and as a young person by the idea that our bodies have to be in balance with the environment around us, and there are connections between the body and connections between the body's health and the environment around us. And so, yes, this book tries to look at different ways in which our bodies correspond to the landscape around us. And we can think of it as a landscape within. And that goes right back to my interest in anatomy described in the book. Does that
Gavin,
help?
I have a comment. Veronica, is that a helpful answer? Does that give you some insight into Gavin's position?
Yes, thank you so much. I just felt this way, and I hear that I was right. That I perceived this.
Okay.
I was impressed by all of the essays, but Nick, in his essay, wrote the last sentence was interesting. In his last sentence, he said, "So the brain works for itself, while the lungs always work for others." Nick, maybe you can elaborate on this. Ask a question for Gavin as well.
that was actually the starting point of the question that I wanted to ask about the brain and its relationship to other organs. First, I would shortly elaborate on what I wrote.
Yeah.
I mean, I tend to perceive as I pondered the function of the brain and as I studied it in medical school, I came to a conclusion that it may be a separate entity that rules over everything else. So just if you think about it, the brain, we use the brain to learn about, to study the brain. So the brain studies itself. So it's really interesting how it's different from all the other organs. And the lungs, what I wrote about the lungs is that they always work for others. I was trying to connect the space to their function as to, for example, not just the delivery of oxygen and carbon dioxide, but also, for example, maintaining the pH or the blood pressure. So it's everything about the stability. So they provide the stability so that all the other organs, including the brain, can function. Yes, so I would really love to know whether you, what thoughts you have about the brain, about what it is, because I did start reading the book from the first chapter about the brain. Yes, so if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, well, it's a very big question, isn't it? The question you're asking is essentially, are we our brains?
Yeah.
And that's a huge question of neuroscience. Recently, I was reading again, you know, the physicist, the theoretical physicist Schrödinger, Erwin Schrödinger, he delivered a wonderful series of essays called Mind and Matter in the 1950s. And he asked the question way back in the 1950s, what does the I of me constitute? And he said a lovely thing. He said that our minds create the world, and then they insinuate themselves into that world. They kind of create the illusion that we're part of it when actually we create it all. It was a very kind of solipsistic perspective. And he compared this to the moment in Homer's Odyssey when there is a bard, which many people believe is a self-portrait of Homer. When Homer speaks of himself being in the poem, just as we create the world and then put ourselves into it. So the question's too big for me to answer, really. I think it needs a century of PhDs to begin to answer it. But yes, I do think that from one perspective, from the commonist everyday perspective, we are our brains, in that when our brain function starts to deteriorate, our perception of the world and the world we conjure into existence deteriorates too. And so the two are very intimately connected. But I don't think that means that we are just one self, because the self, we've got lots of alternative selves, and they each take precedence at different times depending on what we're doing. If that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
We
Sorry,
don't have a lot of time, not Gavin? Sorry, Ian?
Might I interject? It's just I have to go off and hurt some people with sharp knives shortly.
Oh dear.
So you'll have gathered I work as a surgeon, Gavin. It's more a comment than a question, but there's a bit of a question in there as well. I work as a surgeon, and you mentioned in the chapter there was one particular part where you alluded to the blood gas barrier, for want of a better word, and the interface between the world and the blood, and you mentioned that in relationship to, for example, Horizon with this. And I find that interesting. And then you managed to allude to that again when you mentioned the guy jumping off the bridge and ending his life, and that was another transitional period. And it struck me that it struck me that a lot of the function of the lungs, particularly in my neck of the woods where I'm working, is, you know, it's an interface for the administration of anesthetic drugs. It brings people in, it brings a human being into another entirely different dimension altogether. So it's a pathway, a portal to that other world where God knows what goes on there, you know. I'm particularly interested in the unconsciousness. That sort of drew me in as well. But I wondered how, when it's more from a literary perspective rather than a medical humanities perspective, when you were writing that, did you plan to draw the connection between the horizon, the air interface, and the jumping off for the suicide? Was that all pre-planned, or did that come with the writing?
No, it's an interesting question. That piece, that particular piece, did begin with that memory that of being called out into an ambulance to pronounce life extinct on somebody who'd committed suicide. So, and that, I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with that very odd sensation of surgical emphysema when there's air tracking under the skin. It's so bizarre. It's so unexpected. And so I wanted to start with that. Why is that so unexpected? Our world is surrounded by air and air bubbles, but it's so unexpected because air has to keep to its representative compartments. It's when the air starts to track out into other tissues of the body, it's not compatible with life. And so that was the springboard then to start thinking about how special it is that as mammals and as birds, we carry these little portable trees inside ourselves in order to properly oxygenate ourselves. But it's quite odd to carry sacks of air inside your body. It's quite an odd perspective. And that's what led to surgical emphysema. So the whole thing then grew from that idea that how odd is it to have air inside yourself, and what happens when those air spaces start to fill up with solid matter, as in lung cancer. How that weightiness and the loss of that levity that air brings is so dangerous for us.
Can I make a little comment here?
It's fascinating.
Ian's comment was exactly the same comment as a comment from a thoracic surgeon the other day here in Mallorca, and he commented on the horizon, and he said that's a beautiful metaphor. Makes it so simple.
Yeah, I mean, that struck me.
Nice and compact, no?
I've read the book twice. The book came to me by virtue of the fact that I'm doing a research project called Human Beings Being Human. So somebody says, oh, you need to read this book. And I'd sort of heard of it, and I read it as part of the reading list. And I've now read it twice after that. It's bloody good. It's one of those books you read and you think, oh, bugger, why couldn't I have written that, you know? It's absolutely fun. It's one of the best books I've ever read. It's in the top 10.
Well, thank you very much.
I really agree.
Yeah. But that particular metaphor struck me. That stopped me in my tracks. I thought it was quite arresting. It really was. And I just wondered the evolution of it, you know.
I came through, Gavin, came to your book through John Berger. So I thought that was a nice entrance through to Adventures in Human Being, through your review of John Berger's A Fortunate Man, which the students were looking at 2 weeks ago. And my question, if I hope my question is about, you said in a recent article that literature can infuse medicine, and medicine can inspire literature. So really, my question is, as Ian was asking about the event or the format, or how you constructed the lung chapter, which basically was the case history first. What's the relationship between your medical practice and your literature? You have a patient, and then the literature comes from that, or how does it work, Gavin? That's my question, really. It's a big question.
Well, yeah, it's another very big question. I think that there's no formula. There's certainly these different essays often arise in different ways. And what happens is that I tend to start with a reflection or an observation. It might be clinical, it might be from my reading, it might be literary, it might, if it's from reading, it might call to mind a particular patient or a particular event, or vice versa. And then the idea starts to grow. And the two, I firmly believe, do nourish one another. So it's not that one grows out of the other, it's that the two grow back and forward, sustaining one another. And so when I said that medicine and literature both have things to teach one another, it's that I think that literature can remind us as medics of the bigger picture, and also of the reality of different kinds of people's lived experience. Also that medicine can remind literature of it can keep it grounded, and can keep it relevant. And so, yeah, the two are mutually interwoven in many ways, I think.
The critic Joanne Troutman talked about merged sensibility. She was referring to William Carlos Williams. And I was wondering whether you, what you're describing is really describing this, the merged sensibility between what you're doing as a doctor and what you're doing as a writer.
And there's that lovely passage in William Carlos Williams's short memoir, isn't there, where he said that how can medicine not be of immense value to literature, because the practice of medicine is essentially about mankind. And he said, am I not interested in man? Well, there it is. It comes into my clinic every day. I touch it, smell it, feel it. I put my hand on people's suffering bodies. And so the realities of lived experience of humanity are constantly there before him. And the work of his literature, or the work of his poetry, was to essentially simmer that down and create synopses or create elegant illustrations of that, which have the power to move us.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Do we have time for another question from one of the students, Gavin?
Yes, one more. Yeah, I've got to go soon, I'm afraid. But yeah, I could have another question.
Okay, maybe Paulina, you ready for a question?
Too many questions.
Yes, I have quite a few.
Or anybody, Alex, Arsen, anybody?
I have a little question. My name is Arsene Gavin Francis. I have a little question. We know you traveled a lot. What was the reason, or what was the aim of your travel?
Adventure.
Your adventures, yes.
Okay, so you mean geographical travels rather than medical ones? Across the globe, you mean?
I mean graphical travels.
Yeah. Well, the aim of travels, I think, can be summed up by the simple wish to see how other people live and how other landscapes are. And so I think the desire to travel, or the will to travel, in me is very similar to the will to continue being a generalist in medicine, because as a generalist in medicine rather than a partialist, I survey all these different human situations and meet people in all different walks of life. And I want to see and experience and hopefully try and offer some help and support in lots and lots of different situations, very much as the doctor in A Fortunate Man that Jonathan was describing was attempting to do. So yeah, there's a possibility with medicine that you can really be engaged with all different kinds of ways of living and being human. And I think that impulse is very much connected to the desire to see and engage with as much of the planet's surface as you can for as long as you're alive. Does that answer your question?
That's fantastic. I like the partialist, referring as the opposite to the generalist. There's so many questions we have, and I have lots of questions, and but maybe the time is a bit limited. But I'm wondering whether our aim with this project is to introduce literature into the medical curricula, or to introduce literature into medical training, both in undergraduate and postgraduate. Do you think this would help rehumanize the medical profession if it is dehumanized?
Well, that's a very big question. I know a lot of people are working on this right now. I know, for example, Abraham Verghese says very much that what we need to do in medical school is not teach empathy, but preserve it. So when students start out in medical school, often they are very empathetic, driven by ideals of compassion and ideas even of social justice. And those can sometimes be worn out of them by the treadmill of medicine and by the sheer number of lists of things that you have to commit to memory. And so possibly a deeper engagement with medical humanities can help us in that process. But at the same time, I'm aware that if you take a student who doesn't want to engage with that perspective, it's not going to work. And so, yeah, I have a kind of mixed idea. I think it has tremendous value, and I'm delighted by the growth in the field. And I think for those who want to engage with it, the fact that it's a widening and ever enriching field is a good thing. But I do have concerns about the idea of making it compulsory, because I think that might kill it.
Yeah, I understand. Annalise, I'm sure, has a question for you. Annalise or Nick. Nick has a question there, sorry.
I think all of us have lots of questions, but it's just too many of them, and we don't have time, so we just keep silent. But I can just not stop and ask it. Can you, Dr. Francis, can you think of an example, a certain example, when the pondering, so that these philosophical questions of the role of the organs in the body did influence positively the decision making or the relationship between the patient and the doctor, or something like a real concrete example. This is just sometimes think and how I would be able to apply it into real life, and I would really love to hear how you have done it.
So I'm not sure I understand your question. So a real concrete example in which a book or a poem has affected a consultation, or a real concrete example of when the organ, you mentioned organs at the beginning. I meant just taking the background of the book Adventures Human Being we're discussing. So for example, but not exactly that, maybe something else. Well, I think that the kind of attitude and approach to medicine which is described in that book, and in this approach that I take to writing these kinds of essays, helps my medical practice in all sorts of ways, because it keeps me restlessly curious. It keeps me challenging my preconceptions. It makes me continue to try to forge new connections between different silos of knowledge that you wouldn't ordinarily connect. And all of those things can be of great value in energizing and keeping your enthusiasm for your medical practice, because it's a very important job. It's a very ancient job. People have been doing it for thousands of years, and our incredible power of modern medical science can sometimes deaden us a little bit to the wonder or to even the beauty of what it is that you're trying to do. And so I think that keeping that level of engagement with literature, for me, helps foster that enthusiasm and that awareness of the beauty and the value of it. If that answers it.
You also use stories in your clinics as well, no? You have
of course.
with patients and help patients get out, or help patients appreciate their situation? Or is this correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, the best doctors are the ones that can figure out what kind of doctor each patient needs. And some kinds of patients need to hear different stories from your experience, and some kinds of patients want a far more paternalistic, didactic approach. And so, yeah, every consultation is different. That's one of the wonderful aspects of medicine.
But you use books, because I was reading in this recent article about the Afghan veteran, and you recommended he read a book which might help him put his situation into the broader context. Is that correct, or is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll often, if I know somebody well and I know that they're a reader, I will regularly suggest that they pick something up. And sometimes they listen, and sometimes they don't. Okay. Well, it's been a great pleasure speaking to you all. I'm delighted you've enjoyed this long chapter.
Gavin, we have one more question. Is that possible, from Alex?
Oh yeah. Okay. Quickly. Yeah.
Tiny question. I'd like to see maybe sometime your master class of talking with patients. I think it is very interesting to see how you do it in your own way. And my question is, how do you see the doctor of in future? Because also in our university and all over the world, everybody is talking about that the profession, the medical profession, is changing, and it is not the same as 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. Now we're transforming in something new. And how do you see the doctor of future?
Well, I think I will differ actually with you in that I think the doctor of the future is going to have even more tools at their disposal than we already have. They're going to have ever more ready access to, for example, sequencing the genome of every patient, knowing what the different variants of every gene that might predispose to every condition might possibly be. But at the end of the day, the consultation, the fundamental exchange between the physician and his or her patient is still going to be the same kind of relationship. It's going to be a relationship about trust, about finding common ground. It's going to be a relationship about trying to engage with somebody else's lived experience and trying to help them improve whatever is causing them some degree of suffering, trying to help them overcome their problem. And we do that as doctors rather than just trusting the internet, because we have clinical experience and we've seen many other people in that situation before. So the machines and the DNA sequencers of the future are going to change the diagnostics and the therapeutics of what we do, but the conversations we have to have with patients will remain, I think, exactly the same. And possibly there will be less role for generalists in the future because the field of medicine is expanding in every direction so quickly that it's very, very difficult to keep up with even the rudiments of every specialty. But most people have got the same kinds of problems in their lives that they had 100 years ago and 500 years ago. And so we're always going to need generalist clinicians to help people with those kinds of problems.
Gavin, thank you very much.
Okay, great pleasure.
Thank you.
Gavin, thanks so much for taking the time. You've instilled even more enthusiasm in us.
That's good. I could only hope.
Gavin, I'd just like to say that if in the future, in any moment, you might be able to collaborate further with us, we'd be absolutely delighted.
Okay, well, I'll be in touch. Okay, cheers, Jonathan.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. Annalisa, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I've had a few problems during the call. I don't know if you noticed I had to join a couple of times.
Is that anything to
But
do
I'm
with the,
now.
the smartware attack or anything like that, no?
No, I don't think so, hopefully. I just wanted to say I really loved a few, especially one thing that Gavin said, which was we don't really need to teach empathy or compassion to students. We need to preserve it. It's absolutely great.
This was a quotation, I think, from Abraham Verghese, I think.
Okay.
A quote from Abraham, which is, he's written some fantastic books on, I think, Ian might be able to back me up on this, I'm not sure, but I think he was working in the States at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, and he wrote a very important book about this. And he's written lots of very, very interesting books about this from the clinician's point of view. And I agree with you completely, Annalisa. You don't need to teach empathy, but we need to preserve it, because everybody in the screen there in Moscow, they have full of ideals, full of empathy, full of compassion. Yeah. But the problem is, as they go along the ladder, this might disappear a little bit. And I suppose this is what he was talking about.
Yeah.
But I think it disappears by virtue of what we do. I think we're to blame a lot for it. I know I am. I think we're getting them to become, to a certain extent, dehumanize them. We're getting them to shut down emotionally. From the very outset, when you're getting people to dissect cadavers in medical school and telling them, you know, just the very definition of the way you go about that is a very, you lose all you embrace objectivity and lose your subjectivity, which...
Yeah, and is this the defense mechanism, Ian, or?
I think it is. I think it is a defense mechanism, both from the individual learner, but it's also a defense mechanism from the teachers as well, the clinical teachers. I think we think we're making them resilient, but in actual fact, I think we're chipping away at their empathy.
Yeah.
My question for Gavin was whether there was a possibility. I probably didn't ask this directly, but whether there was a possibility of literature reinstalling the empathy, but also acting as a buffer to burnout or to the stress of the doctor's practice. Do you think, Ian? Do you think literature could act as this?
I think literature and other arts. I think each person has their own approach to this, and I think some people will be drawn towards literature. Some people will be drawn towards visual art. Some people will be drawn towards drama or music. I think the arts and the humanities in general have a lot to offer. And it may not work for everybody. Some people prefer to just work think in a binary fashion, and they go on to become pathologists or whatever. But, you know, I think I think the arts and humanities has a lot to bring to it. And I think that folk like ourselves who are interested in this and are propagating these views, I think this is worthy work that we're involved in.
Well, I'm so happy that you're on board, and thanks to Annalisa. And
thank you all. I have to run here, guys, so I'll bid you goodbye now.
Okay, Ian. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
I have a question for Ian.
Yes, I have.
See you soon. Bye.
Wait, Ian, do you have 1 second?
I have a question for everybody, because I wanted to ask one more question to Dr. Francis. Unfortunately, I didn't have an opportunity, so now I'd like to ask it to you. As he visited a lot of countries all over the world, and he is studying medical humanities, as we do, and maybe I think that preserving empathy in students, it may be different in different countries. I mean that the countries are different. The Western countries, Southern, Northern, everybody has their own opinion on empathy. I think it is difficult to...
Hello?
Amen.
Okay, we didn't hear you very well, Alex. So maybe Ian, thanks very much for coming, and thanks for contributing So we'll be in contact with you.
You're all right. It has wrong.
I know I was on a
You must be in the street.
I didn't notice.
Hello?
Oh, it's done.
Okay, I think Ian has gone, and it was great to have him on board as well. But Annalisa, it's your turn, and I think Annalisa now is going to take over the lead, and Annalisa is going to ask some questions to the students in Sechenov. No, Annalisa?
Hello.
Hi, your turn.
Well, I don't really have specific questions. I just wanted to discuss a little bit generally about the two options we gave you this week for They Say, and especially the second one, which I was a bit unsure about because I thought it's really, really wide. It's going to be a little bit, difficult to write it in 500 words. But what did you think about it? What did you think about the chapter in relation to the second question for the task?
Nick, can you read the second question again, please, for everybody?
Reflect on the breath. What does this bodily function represent from both physical, psychological, spiritual, and cultural perspective? Is breathing just an act that keeps us alive?
Okay. And who would like to comment? Paulina, you said you were going to comment today, so do you have would you like to make a comment on this question?
Well, in this chapter we were about to read, there were several mentions of the Renaissance and its impact on the, it was the time of humanistic directions in culture, in medicine, in everything actually. Well, yes, and it was stated somewhere that those times when the Renaissance reigned in Europe, yes, the breath was a symbol of life. Not just the detection of whether the human is alive or not, but also something metaphysical. It was said that. One moment, I remember.
I can share the text with you. I have the text here. I'm going to share the screen, and I'm going to share the text. Okay, so Paulina, tell me the section which you're talking about, which is interesting for you.
It was about lips.
The feather and the lips?
Yes, yes.
Right, so
at the beginning. Read it, please.
Yes, right. It was about the connection of the soul and the lips.
Yeah, it's at the beginning, no?
Yeah.
it's stage 7. No. Maybe should I read it out because I have it right here?
Yeah, read it out. Read it out.
Yes, this one is wrong.
It's just before it was a copy.
Okay, Nick.
Yep. Okay, here we I'm just not sure if that's the excerpt that you were talking about, but and when the
No, but maybe it's this part. No, the lungs are light as spirit. Which part are you talking about? Okay.
It's a Renaissance belief that your soul, page number 78, sorry. It's a Renaissance belief that your soul is attached most firmly to your body at the lips. After all, it's the place where the breath of life enters and leaves your body. That the breath can change between warm and cold just by altering the position of your mouth was once powerful proof of its vitality. Yes, I couldn't formulate this question to Mr. Francis, so I don't know whether I'm right or wrong, and I also don't know whether you have discussed this question or not when it was out. Yes. Gavin Francis compares lungs with trees. Many times in this text it is mentioned that lungs are like trees. As Nick said, as far as I remember, he compares brain with the world itself, yes?
Yes, so the brain that creates the world that we believe to be real. Yeah, it's complicated, but yes.
Like this, yes. And I just came to an opinion, and I don't know whether I'm right or wrong, that the human body for Mr. Francis is something like a complicated metaphorical reflection of the nature of the world itself. I think it's all about philosophy in this text.
No, Paulina, perfect. Annalisa, do you want to answer the question?
Well, am I right or wrong?
Well, I think he said something very interesting earlier on in his intervention. He was talking and emphasizing the importance of the balance between the body and the environment. And maybe the environment is including everything. So I think his idea, Annalisa, I'm not sure if she's there, but I think his idea was this balance, the balance environment, balance between the body and the environment. And I think that's something which he emphasized at the beginning. Is this what you were talking about, Paulina? The balance with the environment.
That's what I tried to express.
No, very, very, very. And what's your opinion? What's your opinion about what he's written in the lung about this, the connection and the balance? What do you think?
It is mentioned as well somewhere that the lungs are light, like yes, like the air, like the leaves. And when the illness breaks out, the lungs become heavier and harder and easier, like that. Yeah. This balance means that the person loses his connection with the nature. So yes, his lungs are not just like trees and its leaves, etc. And I think this disbalance means that the person is in trouble like this.
No, it's not easy to express, Paulina, and you did very well. It's not easy at all. Now in the back, do we have any questions, any comments in the back? In the back, very quiet.
In the back.
Annalisa is on.
Well, do you have any comments on what they said?
Hello, I'm Kate. Actually, I think that lungs are just excellent example of collaboration in our body. Of course, lungs are pivotal for breathing, but they are nothing without, for example, intercostal muscle and ribs. And I think we can take something from this collaboration and to realize the meaning of communication and collaboration in real life. I think that people, that a human, is the highest point
world development, and we can learn something from studying our body.
Okay, no, fantastic. Very good. Very good. Any other comments? Don't worry.
Actually, I have a question. Maybe somebody would like to comment this question. Well, now there is the human medicine, which is developing medical progress, and it is transplantation. And there are some actually kind of logical conditions when people need the lungs to be transplanted, the lung. So how can it affect the balance between the person itself and the environment, the world, the human being?
Oh, very good. Very good. The question Annalisa was asking, which Nick read out, do you have any comments about this question? Nick, for example, do you have any comments about the question that Annalisa was asking?
Would you be so kind as to remind the exact formulation of the question?
The question is the question that you, the question that you asked.
The one that I have. Mm-hmm. So the
yeah, continue. Sorry, Nick.
No, it's okay. It's just I did write an essay where I try to answer that question, and so I would like to continue with the thought about the stability as the main function of the lungs, maybe as connected to their physiological function. So maintaining, it's not just, I wrote that it seems obvious that the only thing the lungs are responsible for is the breathing and the transport of oxygen and CO2 back into the atmosphere, but it's not it. And so many other processes are dependent on this seemingly simple, simple thing, and that's why lungs are really more interesting than we think of them, and the breath is much more extraordinary as we tend to perceive it. So, as I said, physiologically speaking, it's maintaining the blood pressure, the volume of blood circulating, the pH, so that all the proteins in the blood can function. So it's very, very complex. And also, I would like to add, as Veronica said in the beginning, I think, about the breath and Buddhism, about the meditation, how the breath in the Eastern culture becomes an instrument to rise above the time and above the space, to stop thinking, to stop feeling, and just be. So listening to your breath, the 4 steps of the breath, and how calming it can be, and how important this is. So I've never experienced something like that, but I would like to point out that some cultures do not take breath for granted and use it as a tool to achieve something.
So you think we take breath for granted?
I think not, maybe not for granted, but if we don't notice as it happens. It just serves, as I said before, it just serves other organs, everything else. We don't regulate it, it just is, and that's it. And I think that it can be more than that, so that's what I want to
No, I think it's a very interesting point. And what Veronica was talking about in the use of the breath or in breathing in meditation, which is now coming in a strong way in mindfulness, which is now being used in practice and things like this. The breath is now, maybe people are starting to begin to realize the importance of noticing your breathing patterns. And there was from an essay, I think the essay was from Jane, and she was talking, and it's very interesting. She's talking about, she says, to answer this question about the definition of breath, she looked up in an association dictionary, and she was so very surprised by the amount of nouns, adjectives, verbs, etc. And then she came across, she wrote down the most common examples: a sigh, a cloud, a rhythm, a blowing, a frost, a sob, and then whistling, rapid, convulsive, and then the expressions to catch one's breath, to breath away, to hold breath, to take a breath. And it seems very interesting, the metaphors used with breath. And Ian Walsh was commenting on the metaphor about the horizon between the air and the water, the separation, the balance, as Nick, you're talking about now, the balance, the duality. It seems to me a very interesting, list of metaphors involved in breath and breathing. And I think Annalisa is back. Annalisa, are you back? We have bad connection with Belfast today, no?
Honest, yeah, struggling.
Do you have any more comments, any more questions, any more suggestions to? Oh, we have another lady who wants to come in from Newcastle. So we're going to invite Chris Tiblady. Alexander, any comments? Any part of the text you really enjoyed?
Yes, please. I'm sorry. I can.
Actually, to my mind, I think that lungs are not only an example of collaboration, but example of altruism. So I think that they can make our body to function. But the main point is not that, but actually, when I'm only on my first year of studying at the university, and I have just recently learned that lungs need not only ear to function, but special way arteries from somatic circle from somatic blood circulation. So I think
Jonathan, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. I'm just trying to get Chris Tiblady in on the conversation. And Annalisa, I think. Oh, here he is. Here he is. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
Can you hear us?
No.
Hi.
No? Chris. Hello?
Hi, Jonathan. Lisa was talking about her.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, continue.
Yes, please. Go on. No.
And so the lungs need just fresh blood from somatic circulation too, and I think it's just the major point, the most important thing. So I want to conclude that entries need just positive energy and exchange from the people that they help. So I think it's just some kind of philosophical example of well-being. And this exchange of positive energy is just energy of our being of our lives.
Nick, you were shaking your head or agreeing?
I understand what it is. Yeah, I understand. I'm sorry. I understand what Kate was saying, and yes, it's just altruism cannot exist on its own, so it does need the blood from the large I understand. So the bronchial arteries and so on, of course, and maybe that relates to. But I didn't quite understand what exactly you're. Of course, it's a philosophical question, but can it be applied to anything or to relationship or just like that to altruism as a definition? Is that what you wanted to relate it to?
Actually, I want to thank you for your
Yeah.
comments, and actually, I think that I want to point out that our body is just
Like it's exchange. It's always an exchange. It's always not just there, but in reverse.
I think that's
It's like
it's just a reflection of our world being, and we should pay much attention to it, to study all the world. Our body is just some kind of mother of being.
Yeah, I think that Kate is talking about, as I understood, she's talking about that our body is the little example of, the little model of everything that is happening in the universe. So it's the reflection of the global processes. So if we know what is the altruism, we have lungs to be the model of the altruism in the big, macro.
I think we have.
Yeah, sorry, Alex, sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Small comment. I think for next time we have to ask to come some philosophers to speak about what is body, because they have so much opinions on that, and it would be interesting to share our opinions with them.
No, it's a very good idea. Very good idea. But I'm going back to the last sentence of Nick's, where he says that basically the brain is egotistical and the lung is the altruistic. Would everybody agree with this?
I agree absolutely, because all the parts of the body work for brain. Even if the heart stops, the brain brain can work maybe for several seconds, 1 minute maybe, but the brain takes all the resources of our body, all the.
But it's just a very beautiful concept that I'd never really thought of before. But I read this last sentence and I thought, yes, interesting, very interesting. Girl, I don't know your name. Do you have any comment? In front, next to Paul.
Thank you for the question. I have some comments about lungs and brains. I think that brains is the main organ of our body because it's so interesting, it's so unusual how this organism works, because so many different science works and scientists work on this problem of this work, so a lot of different theories of its work, but we don't know all function of the brain, all structure of the brain, because I speak with a lot of different people about brain, and they have their own mind about this problem, about the structure, about this function, and I think it's only my opinion. The brain is the main organ. Maybe it's
not
silly.
not the only one organ. Not only brain. Yes. There are some organs that are much more.
And what about, let's go back to the text. Arsene, which part of the text did you enjoy the most?
To be honest, I haven't read the text.
That's okay now. That's okay. And Alex, what about you?
So yeah, I'm sorry, Jonathan, but I didn't read completely the text. Only some parts.
Any more comments? Any more? Yeah, tell me, Paulina.
Okay, then we decided that the lungs compare with trees somehow. Okay. And what about the brain? With which structure of nature of the world can be compared? So I don't know, only with humans, only with their consciousness, and that's all? Or I can't,
Jonathan,
I can't decide.
what about brain?
It's an interesting question. A very interesting question.
I'm not sure about that. No, I think, no, it's just the tree cannot exist without water, the earth cannot exist without water, anything cannot exist without water. And
No.
water may be like a nerve or something, I don't know. But, and the trees innervated as well.
Water and oceans are blood and...
No, I understand. Or maybe not.
Anybody have any suggestions at the back?
Maybe brain. I think brain. Well, there's okay. Well, I think that brain is mankind. It is because everybody of us we are born sometime and then we die, and during our life we give new lives. We make children, so then they go on. So the brain makes the same thing. It uses all the resources of our body, but it always makes something new. It makes our smartness. It makes us more human beings. Maybe I don't know how to say it in English. The brain is mankind.
Yeah. I have a question, Nick. Sorry.
Yes, but it's a completely different question. Maybe we will finish if you want to finish with the brain.
No,
I would like to come back to the text because in the end, there's a really interesting sentence that I had trouble to interpret. So
let me share the screen and share the text. I think it's important to go back to the text.
Yes, but
tell me where it is.
It's in the very end. When I'm so breathless, I can hardly move. That one. So the very end of the chapter.
It's here. No, the wind was invisible.
Yeah, after the crematorium.
Okay, perfect. Okay, can you read, Nick? Can you read the last 3 paragraphs, please?
Yes. I followed the direction of his finger. No, from this angle, I'm not sure. I'm sorry, that was not the beginning. He was asking. I will start again. Look up there, he said, pointing up the hill where a stand of trees was greening with the spring. Do you know what's through those trees? I followed the direction of his finger. No, from this angle, I'm not sure. The crematorium, he said. After a few moments, he added, I'm not scared. When I'm so breathless, I can hardly move. I see smoke from its chimney and think it might not be so bad to be up there blowing over the city. The wind was invisible, light as spirit, seen only in the motion of the trees and the smoke, which on that day at least was carrying the ashes of somebody else. So the sentence that I was asking about is when I'm so breathless I can hardly move, I see smoke from the chimney, that one. What do you think about it? What does it mean? Why does he say that?
Any ideas?
Maybe I can give a comment. He said that it is no sense for him to leave because he's so breathless. Because as I wrote, the act of breathing gives us the sense of freedom, some kind of. And when we have different emotions or our mood differs depending on different occasions, our breath changes also. And when you are breathless, you have nothing to feel because our feelings they are reflections of our breath, and our breathing is the reflections of our feelings. And when you have no ability to breathe as you feel and as you perceive the moment just now, and that's why I think he said so. But maybe another point he could just said like this because it is very hard for him because he was really breathless. And about another sentence when he said that Yes.
But does anybody else have any opinion on this sentence? At the back, or Paulino, Alex, Arsen, anybody have any interpretations of this sentence? Nick, what you're asking the question because you have doubts, and what are your doubts?
So obviously one should not perceive what he's saying here literally. He doesn't want to be the smoke from the chimney of the crematorium, I think. But it's just, so he sees that his life is so, maybe it's about the freedom. I'm sorry, it's very hard for me to say. That's why I'm actually asking.
But maybe he's come to the point in his life where death is not such a bad thing.
Oh.
Maybe he's come to the point of life where that death is a liberation.
I understand. Oh, so maybe it's more literal than I thought. So
it's possible. It's possible.
Yes.
I mean, the idea would have been to ask Gavin Francis, but it's possible. This is a real a case, a real patient.
Yes, I wanted to.
It's probably the question is probably taken directly from, or changed a little bit, but I'm sure it's a real patient, and I don't know what you think, what anybody thinks, but maybe the patient is so bad, the patient cannot breathe. The patient is we'd use the expression in English, on his last legs. So maybe the idea of death is freedom, and he will be blowing over the city. He will be part of the air. And this is maybe the suggestion. I'm not sure. What does anybody else think?
I think you're right. I realized that just now. I don't know why I didn't do that from the beginning, but yes. He just couldn't take it anymore. That's as simple as that.
For a breathless person, death is a kind of liberation.
Oh, well, it's cancer. With cancer, you have pain. It's just, it's simpler than that.
He's suffering a lot.
Yes.
He's suffering a lot. I think the last paragraph is also a beautiful paragraph. The wind was invisible, light as spirit, seen only in the motion of the trees and the smoke, which on that day at least was carrying the ashes of somebody else. This is maybe going back to what Gavin Francis was talking about with the setting of the person in the environment, and the relationship between the breath of the person and the air that they're breathing. And I think it's a very nice and a rounded way to finish the chapter, which refers back to the metaphor about can everybody see the text?
Yes.
The surgeon, Ian Walsh from Belfast, was talking about this section. And the thoracic surgeon who I was talking to a couple of days ago was talking about this metaphor here. Liquid and air must keep to their separate compartments in the body, just as a horizon separates the sea from the sky. It's another beautiful sentence, and a sentence of simplicity, beauty, and depth. Because in reality, it explains things very well in a simple way, but in a very beautiful way. And this is what the thoracic surgeon mentioned, and I also think this is what Ian Walsh was talking about. Any other parts of the text you think are worth commenting on? We have another 5-10 minutes. Else? Or about topic. I have a question for all of you, and Dr. Gavin Francis was talking about how he used the writing in his medicine, and how he used the medicine in his writing, the connect and the symbiosis and the exchange between the two, I think, is very interesting. He's using the clinical cases, and I will read a little bit from the preface, which maybe nobody has had the possibility to read. I will read this because I think it's also a very interesting part. He says, a note on confidentiality. This book is a series of stories about the body in sickness and in health, in living and dying. Just as physicians must honor the privileged access they have to our bodies, they must honor the trust with which we share our stories. Even as long as 2,500 years ago, that obligation was recognized. The Hippocratic Oath insists, whatsoever in the course of practice you see or hear that ought never to be published abroad, you will not divulge. As a doctor, who is also a writer, I've spent a great deal of time deliberating over that use of ought, considering what cannot be said without betraying the confidence of my patients. The reflections that follow in the book are grounded in my clinical experience. And this is, if you read the book and if you read the section about the lung, it's very obvious and makes the book even more powerful. But the patients in them have been so disguised as to be unrecognizable. Any similarities that remain are coincidental. Protecting confidences, and listen, this is interesting, is an essential part of what I do. Confidence means with faith. We are all patients sooner or later. We all want faith that we will be heard and that our privacy will be respected. I think it's a very interesting note about confidentiality, and it harks back, goes back to the point that he was reiterating, in that the patient-doctor trust, the patient trust in the doctor is the critical thing. He mentioned that, I think it was, who was it, Alex or maybe Arson, talking about the future of the doctor. And he said that the future, he thought there would be more machines, more techniques, more at the genome, etc., more analysis, more tests. But the core or the key to medicine would still be the same. And the key would still be the trust between the doctor and the patient, the trust the patient had with the doctor. The faith is maybe, possibly, a word to be used in this context. And his 20 minutes conversation or the answering of the questions I thought was very interesting. And he used some words which I think are needed to be emphasized. He was talking a lot about the wonder. He talked a lot about faith. He talked a lot about trust and wonder, the wonder in the human being, the wonder that the doctor, the marvel that is the human body, the human being, the spirit, the relationship between the human and his or her position in the environment. And I find this fascinating. And I think he is an extraordinary doctor who writes, or writer who doctors, or who helps and heals people. And I think it was a real privilege for me and for all of us to be able to ask him a few questions. And I don't know if you have any other comments about that. Veronica, Alex, anybody?
Yes, I have one question and one comment. I'll send the question. I'll send the question to you. When you started your comment, you said that you cited Dr. Francis, that writing helps him in his work with patients. and his medical career helps him with writing. I can fully agree with the second position, that working as a doctor helps to write. We know a lot of different examples of famous writers and novelists that were perfect doctors at the same time. But as for me, I cannot understand how writing can help people, can help doctors to work with patients. This is my question.
Okay, this is a very interesting point, Alex. And Gavin Francis, I mentioned, has just written an article. No, I think it's a summary of a talk he gave in a conference. I'm not sure exactly where, I can't remember where, but it's entitled Story Healing. Literature can enthuse medicine, and medicine can inspire literature. They are complementary treatments for being human. And he explains a case. And I can read it because I think it's interesting. He talks about an Afghan, a soldier who was in Afghanistan, and he says, 15 years after coming home, he is still haunted by flashbacks of burning buildings and sniper fire. He doesn't work, rarely goes out, sleeps poorly. And to relieve his emotional anguish, he sometimes slices at his own forearms. Since leaving the army, he has never had a girlfriend. Fraser was once thickly muscled, but weight has fallen off him. Self-neglect has robbed him of strength and self-confidence. Prescription drugs failed to fully quieten the terror that trembles in his mind. Whenever I used to see him in clinic, he'd sit on the edge of his seat, mopping sweat from his forehead and temples. I'd listen to his stories, tweak his medications, and tentatively offer advice. When Fraser began coming to see me, this is Gavin Francis, was reading Redeployment by Phil Clay, short stories about US military operations. No book can substitute direct experience, but Clay's stories gave me, the doctor, a way to start talking about what Fraser, the patient, was going through. When I finished the book, I offered the book to the patient. He found reassurance. He found comfort in what I found illuminating. Our conversations took new directions as we discussed aspects of the book. His road will be a long one, but I'm convinced that stories, Alex, this is the answer to your question.
Yes, yes.
I am convinced that stories have played a part, however modest, in his recovery. This is a very interesting article or conference because he says, and he said today, that when the patient, he believes the patient is inclined to accept the book or is a reader, then he will use literature to help the patient.
Yeah.
Yes, and to experience unexperienced positions of different persons, because we can't experience everything in the world, but we can read books and experience it very.
Yes.
And there are a lot of books which he mentions. He mentions, for example, there's one book by which we're not studying in this course, but there's a book by William Styron, who was a writer, and he wrote a book called Darkness Visible, which Gavin Francis says offers an eloquent testimony of how it feels to suffer severe depression. And I've seen it give, and I have seen it, Alex, and everybody, I've seen it give sufferers a promise and encouragement that they might be able to find a way back to life. So I understand your doubt, Alex. I understand your question. But I think it's a very beautiful thing if books and literature can help the doctor help the patient.
So yes, now I agree, and impressed. I understand the literature for doctors like it is like guidelines. I mean, In some way, you know that the doctor can read some book and understand the situation. Even if it is, maybe it can be a fantastic situation, but at the same time it can give some keys to doctor to make right decision and to find right words. Maybe now I can agree with it.
But also the patient reading the book can understand as well. So the doctor can, the trust that the patient has with the doctor can mean that the doctor can say, I suggest you read this book. This book might be of interest to you, and this book might help you. So it's a kind of dialogue between the doctor and patient.
But not all the patients want to read books. Sometimes they're depressed, or sometimes they don't like reading, or something else. So always doctors can read books, rarely patients. I
No, Alex, I don't agree with that, Alex. I don't agree with that. But I agree that not all patients read books. But Gavin Francis said that you had to, not all patients, it was depending on the patient, obviously. Some patients are readers, some patients are more ready to read the book than others. No, but it's interesting. I think it's very interesting, very, very interesting. Do you have any comments, anybody? We've lost everybody. I think we've lost Annalisa, we've lost Ian Walsh, but everybody's probably following us on Facebook, on YouTube. Alex, you have another question or a comment?
I said no. I just raised my hand and said Moscow stay strong. Moscow and Mallorca.
And tell me, is Krasnoyarsk is not connected? No.
No, they are not connected in Skype.
And has anybody made any comments on Facebook or on Twitter?
Well, this day we have interesting situation with Facebook, and because we don't broadcast in Facebook, we broadcast in YouTube. But we put the link of YouTube in Facebook group. Yes.
Okay. Oh, you put a link because I told lots of people to look at the Facebook.
Yes, but there is a link.
There is a link.
Okay. But has anybody made any comments?
Well, we didn't see because the conversation was very yes.
Very animated. Very animated. Okay, well, I don't know if there's any more questions, any more comments, or any more suggestions. Arsen, do you have anything to say?
It's very hard for me because for me I have to listen the information, and after a little bit time I can say my opinion on this. It's not very easy for me to comment right now.
He's like stomach. He digests.
Alexander, control your tongue, please. Control your tongue. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, and especially Veronica, Alexander, and to everybody. Everybody, thank you very much. And if you have any comments, maybe I think we could continue, hopefully, the line and the thread with Dr. Gavin Francis. So if you think about any questions you would like to ask him, I'm sure he would be delighted to answer. So I think today was, for me, a very special day to have the writer of, I think, one of the best books. And Ian Walsh said one of his top 10 books. I mean, this is a fantastic privilege, an honor for us. And I think all of you did very well, and the questions were superb. And on to the next text. The next text is a Russian writer. The text is a baptism by rotation by Mikhail Bulgakov, but the text will be in English, or maybe you can read it both in Russian and English. And I haven't thought of the questions yet, but maybe we could change it a little bit. And maybe because maybe you could think of a question. Veronica, I'm going to give you the difficult task of thinking of the questions for the students, okay? Have you read the text?
Yes, I read it, but it was quite long ago. I can just give a little comment, but it would be deep enough to.
Okay, you and I will be in contact about this, and we'll discuss this. Okay.
And about the Bulgakov story, or
yeah, we can talk about it. You and I can have a petit comité via Skype and discuss the next tasks, because I'm going to be very democratic, like Alexander, very democratic. Everybody asks questions. Alex, I can't see you because you're hidden behind. But you have any comments to make? You can put the icing on the cake.
Can you repeat this? Okay, yes, okay. I'm sorry. Well, I think that this, as we written in Facebook, this session was really specific, and I think everybody of us enjoyed it. And as you see on Skype, a lot of new faces, a lot of new people here. Of course, we have our normal stuff. For everybody visits our sessions, but today a lot of new people, and I believe that they will come next time because this project has really big influence on our university, and I believe that we'll make big plans and reach all the points of it.
Okay, I agree with you completely, and I think that next week we will have students from Belfast and students from Pompey Fabra next time in 2 weeks, because Dr. Gear told me that for the next session we'll have students from Pompey Fabra. The program for the symposium is well underway, and we've had a lot of acceptances for very important speakers, so it's very exciting. Today I had an acceptance from a speaker from McGill University in Montreal, and so I think things are progressing, and I'm very, very happy, and especially today I thought was superb. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
I'll send you the video on YouTube. Veronica.